I'm going to start off by introducing myself, introducing our panelists. Hopefully some more folks will join us as we go. Like I said, as you all were coming in, that I'm sure people will be joining us as we get going, and hoping for a lively discussion here. And I'm really excited about, just kind of what we can talk about and what our panelists can bring to this discussion. So our panel today is called Supporting Students Through Institutional Partnerships and Collaboration. My name is Eric Fierro. I am an administrative coordinator at Achieving the Dream. I myself am also an adjunct faculty at Montgomery College in Maryland in music. And I'm excited to hear what our panelists are here to share today. Our panelists come from Houston Community College and Indian River State College. Our panelists include Amanda Guerrero, Director of Instructional Support and Academic Instruction, Nathan Smith, Philosophy Instructor and OER Coordinator, Lawrence Pay, Economics Instructor, and then from Indian River State College, Lynn Odell, Project Director and STEM Pioneers. I'll be helping to moderate. And we also have Richard Sebastian here who will help with the chat moderation. So feel free to put questions in the chat, respond out loud, however you want to engage. We'd love to see your faces. I feel like I'm back teaching high school again. Black boxes with white names. That was my life for the pandemic school year. But we're going to go ahead and get started with just kind of giving the panelists a chance to introduce themselves and talk about what their experience has been in this area, and then we'll have some questions, we'll have some discussion, and we'll go from there. Anyone want to take it away?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and get started unless somebody else was talking. Didn't mean to talk over somebody. We're okay? So I'm Nathan Smith. I'm Houston Community College, and I am a philosophy faculty member and OER coordinator. I think my role most relevant, though, to this discussion is as the project lead on implementing an adaptive courseware initiative, pilot initiative at Houston Community College. And we were approached by this project, and the idea sounded really interesting. Let's see if we can leverage adaptive courseware and personalized learning to improve student success, and particularly targeting those disadvantaged groups of students that really, make up a significant part of our student population at HCC. And so it was an exciting idea. And when we initially came up with the plan, we immediately thought of reaching out to our student support services department, the tutoring. And wanted to see if there was a way that we could use the data that we're getting from student interaction with the courseware and teach faculty and students, and then also our tutoring center, sort of get them involved in kind of reading the data, seeing what students need, what areas they're struggling in, getting faculty engaged early on in the semester, and see if that could be a driver of student success. So we brought Amanda in very early on in the process to talk and brainstorm right at the very beginning, kind of how can we use these support services in a complementary way with the new technology, the kind of more adaptive style. So to give you kind of an overview of what we were doing at HCC with respect to this project, we had 3 different courses, one a math, college algebra, and college and math for business. So the intro math for business. So, and then we also had economics, and this was we targeted the macroeconomics course. And, we had initially, 5 or 6 instructors that expanded to 7 or 8. In the first semester, we had about 300 students enrolled. And then, by last fall, we were at about 800 students. The program in these departments has continued to be of interest. The idea of using adaptive courseware and leveraging the personalized learning, but also the the data that you get from student participation to kind of address issues early on. That idea continues to be influential, I think, among the faculty. And then the really cool thing that we have seen is like our tutoring center has really, and I'll let Amanda take this and explain more about what they're doing, but they've really implemented some procedures that allow them to capture quite a bit of student data in terms of what students are doing when they go to the tutoring center, their experience, and so forth. And we did some things where we kind of took the information we were getting from the courseware providers, and we kind of then aligned that with the data we were getting from the tutoring center. And we were able to see, for instance, that there were students who were in these classes and they were making considerable use of the resources in tutoring, and those students were doing quite well in the course. What we saw was there's a pretty big gap. There were like a few students who used the tutoring center a lot, and then some that used it, and the vast majority used it maybe once or twice, and maybe not at all. So we were seeing some things like this. I think it was revealing to us to see all of this information and kind of correlate those different sources of data to try to get a better picture of kind of what's happening for students in the classroom. But yeah, so that's kind of the big view, that's the overview of what we were doing at Houston Community College. And I'm really glad to have Amanda and Lawrence here, who were on the ground dealing with students, and probably talk a lot more about what their experience was.
Well, I guess that's a good segue into talking a little bit about tutoring. My name is Amanda Guerrero, Director for Instructional Support. It's just a fancy way of saying that I oversee all the tutoring activities with Houston Community College. I think it's important when talking about a school like Houston Community College and to understand the scope. So, we have 22 campuses across the Houston metropolitan area, and we have about 14 academic success centers where tutoring activities, supplemental instruction, and academic coaching and things of that nature take place in. And tutoring is often seen as an area that can come in and help when students need the assistance, or it's and I don't want to say an afterthought, but it's rarely thought of at the front end of projects. It's usually thought of in the middle to the end to try and see how we can swoop in and help. But this was different. This was something that we were really excited about because we were able to have input about how we might be able to implement, execute, and create data around the students' progress and what and how we can train the tutors on the front end of how to help a student who is in a course that has adaptive courseware. And so we were tickled pink to be brought in at the very beginning of this project. We did launch with our economics and our math college algebra courses. We were looking at courses that had higher enrollments and lower success rates. And so in doing so, we were able to bring in two of our key tutors. One is a full-time tutor in mathematics. We only have two full-time tutors in the system right now, one for English and writing and one for mathematics, hoping to expand that in the future. And then Lawrence Pay, who is one of our economics faculty members, but also passionate about student support, that he actually also integrates every semester a certain number of hours that he dedicates for tutoring. And so by pulling in these key individuals, we were able to have them be part of the plan and then part of the training of the other tutors that are out there at our other centers. So the key thing that I would like to say about adaptive courseware is that the students were able to bring in information and show the tutors where specifically they were struggling with certain concepts. And that in itself helped those tutoring sessions to be more focused on what that student particularly needed. oftentimes students will come in and you'll ask them, you know, there's a certain amount of time that's a fact-finding mission. We call it the discovery part of the tutoring session, where there's dialogue between the tutor and the student, and sometimes the students don't always know what they need when they come in. So this really helped from an efficiency standpoint, and then also just to allow for focused attention to be put where it needed to be put for that particular student. So we were very you know, glad to have been given the opportunity to work with this, and we could see the benefits of how adaptive coursework can shape the interaction, and also bridge communication between faculty and tutors and students. So it was a little bit more of a full circle solution for us. From a data standpoint, so we do track every student who comes in for tutoring. They sign in through an electronic system when they come into the tutoring center. It's called AccuTrack or AccuSQL. And we house that on a SQL server at our main district office. So we don't have any information going to a cloud or to a third party. It's all protected behind our firewall. And we capture this, you know, the student's name, their schedule automatically populates when they sign in, they select their course that they're coming for assistance with, and then the tutor that they're actually seeing can tag that student and go back in and enter the notes from their particular tutor session. So that's where we gather all the information on our students, and that helps us with analyzing traffic patterns and seeing what time students are coming in and for what subjects and what their frequency is. And that helps us really with our staffing, you know, have anywhere between 130 to 230 tutors at any given time. More than 50% of our tutors are faculty tutor 3. So it's important for us to be able to make those types of administrative decisions so that we can best serve the students. And one cool thing that if any institute is thinking about, you know, implementing adaptive courseware, that I recommend doing on the front end is making sure that you bring in and have conversations with your Office of Institutional Research, because we were gathering so much information and data on students from way before adaptive courseware came into the picture. It made it a lot easier for us to be able to crunch information and data in our dashboard, because we have a dashboard where we can, you know, look at all of this data and then be able to report back on our findings in terms of what the success rates were. Students who came, we found that students who came in, you know, earlier and more frequently in the semester obviously had higher outcomes in terms of A, B's, and C's than the students who waited later in the semester to get help. You know, that kind of thing. It paints a bigger, a fuller picture, so that then you can customize, you know, your approach for how you want to go and make your services better or make them more effective, or where you can, you know, tweak things here or there. That's kind of what I have to say about the topic. But
That's great. Thank you, Amanda. Lawrence, before we move over to Indian River State, as we overview, anything you want to add to what Amanda and Nathan have shared about the Houston experience? Oh, you're muted, Lawrence.
The only thing that, as I said, both of them did very well, because we work in coordinations with one another, and Amanda is over the tutoring program. So we communicate our schedule to all of the economic professors so that they can actually reach out to me with their students and who need help and who don't need help. And then, of course, we are proactive in our approach, more especially in the economic department, because we like to encourage them. I always say to them, when I send an email out, is, look, I need for you to start coming on week 1, now week 2, now week 3, now week 4. So by that constant communications to all the faculties, then I can get those students coming in, and actually I can work with them, not only coming in November and December when the semester is coming to an end. So it's really been a good success. I've seen my grades actually improve because of the tutorial services and opportunity that we provide to students.
Great, thank you. So let's move over to Lynn Odell at Indian River State. I'm also going to put into the chat the link to the case study that has been published from the work done at Indian River State. Houston's case study is still coming. So if you want to get a copy of that with all the details, which we're going to continue talking about, feel free to go over to ATD's website and sign up for our newsletter, and you'll get notified about when that case study gets published. But I'll put that in the chat, and I'll let Lynn talk about the Indian River experience.
Hi, I'm Lynn O'Dell, and I am the project director of our STEM Pioneer project. It's a brand new project, so I transitioned from a previous role into this role. But with the Every Learner Everywhere grant, I was the coordinator. And the grant came at just a fantastic time because we were finishing up our quality enhancement plan, our QEP, for our institution's accreditation, and we were working on intermediate algebra and trying different modalities of how to teach that course to help our students be successful, because we found that if they were not successful in intermediate algebra, they were less likely to be able to graduate. And we found out that a lot of our students, the classes they were missing were math courses, and that's why they were not graduating. So the QEP, we tried a lot of different things. And one thing that we found was embedding tutors in the classes. And then some of the classes were also in a computer lab. That was so successful that we ended up expanding it, and we expanded to the use of peer tutors, which we found was even better because the peer tutors were just like the students they were helping. They had gone through the courses. They knew how the courseware worked. They knew what the classes were all about. So they were in a unique position to go ahead and help our students. That being said, in addition, we developed such a strong partnership with our academic support center, where we would continuously share the schedule of topics for the courses, so that any student that walked in on any of our campuses, we have 5 locations, they knew what content was being covered, even if the student didn't know. I need help with math and I don't know what I'm learning. But by having that schedule of topics shared with our support center, they were able to help the students that walked in. We also include our STEM coordinator for our academic support center in all of our math department meetings. So they hear the conversations that are being had about curriculum changes, things that we're noticing in the classroom. So they're very actively involved in what's going on. With Every Learner Everywhere, we took those things that we learned in our QEP and we expanded it. So we ended up including chemistry, intro to chemistry, which we found that a lot of students, especially if they were considering a STEM path, they were struggling sometimes because some of our students necessarily have not had exposure to chemistry. So they did, NSpark was the courseware that they used, and they kind of did a flip model. And we embedded peer tutors in the chemistry courses. So they were getting that additional support. We pulled those students from our bachelor's program, that our biology bachelor's degree program. So the students that are the peer tutors had been through all of the courses. They knew what the students, what the content was going to be in the courses. And so they've been able to help. And then we also included English Comp 1. They came on board with this project towards the end of the project because there's not a lot of adaptive software out there for English. We also found that the adaptive that we were using in our intermediate didn't necessarily meet the goals that we wanted. And so the department came together and said, well, let's try it in college algebra and see what happens. We had much better success with the college algebra than we did with the intermediate algebra. And the feedback from the faculty and the students in the courses and the peer tutors was tremendous. Another thing that we do is we conduct focus groups. We conduct focus groups with our students that are in these courses. We conduct focus groups with the faculty that are involved in the courses and the peer tutors that are involved. And because it's in a confidential environment where they feel free to share, we have learned so much about our courses from 3 different perspectives. And some of the things that we thought were happening in the classes, that we thought the experiences that our students were having, wasn't necessarily the case when we sat down and we talked to them one-on-one. So I highly recommend doing that if you're doing any kind of research or any kind of pilots or anything, because perceptions are everything. Let me see. Quantitative Reasoning was another course that we tried the adaptive in. That course is an intro course for our liberal arts math courses. What we found with using the adaptive in the quantitative reasoning course was that we saw a decrease in the achievement gap between our white and our Black students. And we had not seen that before in the previous ways that we had the course set up. So when you're talking about equity, that was very eye-opening. And so when we saw that in the data, we just decided that we were doing adaptive in all sections of our quantitative reasoning, because we want our courses to be equitable, and the faculty were just ecstatic that we saw such a great improvement in the opportunities for our students. To tell you a little bit about the size of our college and a little bit about our student demographic, we have about 23,000 students that attend Indian River State College. We are considered a Hispanic serving institution. 32% of our student population is Hispanic. 43% of our students are white, and about 16% of our students are Black. Our average age of our students is 26. So we have obviously a lot of working students that come to school here. About 60% of our students are part-time, which means they have families and full-time jobs. So anything that we can do on our end to help our students be successful, we're all in. When it comes to training of our peer tutors, I developed a training course for our peer tutors that every peer tutor goes through. And it started out with 10 modules of some skills, general teaching and assisting skills that we felt that our students need, those soft skills beyond the course content. We are now up to 13 modules because of feedback from our peer tutors of what additional information that they wanted. They wanted more information on how to help students with learning disabilities. So we created a whole module on how do you assist a student, and then also all the confidentiality. You can't, ask a student if you have a disability, but kind of recognizing some of the things and assisting students. And then of course, when we went into the pandemic, online tutoring, transitioning these courses from being face-to-face to an online environment by having those peer tutors already embedded in those courses. We pulled them into that online environment, and they were able to assist our students and be an additional person in those courses to help. Another thing that we do is all of our peer tutors are given access to the course software. So our course leads develop a course shell for our tutors. They have access to everything, all the problems, all the examples, all the videos, everything. So when they are helping a student, they can go right into the software and it looks just like what the students are working on, and they can help. They also are able, when they're doing like test reviews and such, they can go in and download some of the test review questions and have test review sessions with our students. So that helps a lot, because what they see is what the students are seeing, and it's how the faculty have developed the courses.
Great, thank you all so much for all of that, like really helpful information, and really interesting. And Lawrence, were you raising your hand at me? You're muted if you're talking. Oh. You unmuted and then remuted yourself. There you are.
Okay. Yes. During her presentation, she actually touched on something that brought a question to my mind, because I know we started doing something exactly what she talked about, peer embedded tutoring. So I was going to ask Amanda and Dr. Smith, whatever happened to, I remember I signed all of those documents just before the pandemic. That was in 2019. Then the pandemic hit 2020, and I never heard of it anymore, because I remember the peer tutoring that we signed up for, these students that we were training, they were going to be embedded with the instructors in the classroom and they were going to be paid.
Yeah.
But I never heard of it since the pandemic started. So I'm glad she opened that can of worms. But I say, you know what? Instead of asking this question privately, let me ask it publicly and say, guys, tell me what went wrong.
No, Lawrence, this is Amanda. I can address some of that. So we also had, and I just hit Lynn up on the side, actually wanting to further discuss with her. We started a pilot last spring for embedded tutoring, and this was outside of our supplemental instruction program. So we do have a supplemental instruction program that's run by one of my cohorts, Dr. Pauline Warren, and it's a great program. And she has over 50 SI leaders that are embedded into the classroom doing that work. We wanted to find another way that we could utilize our tutors to embed them into particular classes specific for our dual credit program and some of our co-requisites. And then we have a Puente program as well. And so we did that last spring, and there was a lot of things going on this last semester with, you know, when we were going to be starting back on campus, if we were going to continue online, and there was a lot of back and forth with this that kind of delayed our ability to pick it back up this semester, but we are still doing SI sessions. And so conversations learned are still taking place. In fact, I have a meeting scheduled later this week with Dr. Drain. So I report to our Associate Vice Chancellor of Instructional Services. So I'm there with our deans every time we have a meeting. It really helps with our communication on what's going on in their particular programs and courses and where the needs are for specific tutors and areas. And we do a lot of collaboration that way. So, but yes, Lynn, I'm excited about scheduling some time to talk with you a little bit more. I do have a question. Have you guys, since you have all those modules created, have you applied for like your CRLA certification?
That's what we're in the process of doing. We wanted to really get the course solidified and get documentation. I will say that all the peer tutors get paid for taking the class.
Yeah.
And they get a certificate at the end. So they can add it to their, you know, co-curricular or their transcripts and use it when they leave us and go to a university, that they have official experience and they've been through the training. So,
that's like writing a dissertation, getting that certification done, but it's definitely, it makes a lot of sense, all the components of it.
What is, can I intervene and ask, what is CRLA? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so it's the College Reading and Learning Association certification, and it's an international tutor training program certification. So once your program meets the criteria of hiring, onboarding, training, evaluating, your program has to be built in a way that you're meeting their objectives and criteria for each of those categories, then your program becomes certified. And then at that point, you can certify your tutors based on what they have completed training wise. A certain number of hours have to be in person that training or real time. So you could do video conferencing technically and do some of that work there. And then the others can be, say, like online type training. But, you know, just a lot of areas that make sense, like your soft skills. How do you open a session? How do you work with conflict management or difficult students? Or, you know, how do you, how do you build rapport? How do you close a session? How do you give action items? You know, just a lot of different things that we do that have relevance to our work.
So that kind of ties back to the keynote with what Sharon was talking about with giving our students actionable skills, right? When she was talking about in the keynote, talking about those badges, but in this case, you're talking about like a certification then that the students could take that skill and do something with it.
They can.
Yeah, and one thing that I used the CRLA and what the recommendations were, and you can add to it. So I used some of the ones that we felt were very important, and then I've added to it. And at the end of the course, I have all the peer tutors fill out a survey and let me know, okay, when you're looking at this course and when you've been in the classroom and you've been working with students, is there something that we're not giving you enough information and enough assistance with? And that's been huge, getting that feedback from them, because their experience is a lot different with students than what ours is. So having that insight has been tremendous. So it's a course that's constantly evolving, and that's why, you know, it started out as 10 modules and now we're up to 12, and it looks like we're going to end up with 13 because there's some more, you know, things that they've pointed out that they would like us to include. But we've also gotten feedback that from them that it's made them better students themselves. So because especially when they're in those introductory courses, they're constantly going over those foundational skills in those courses. So when they get into our bachelor's program, they've got those foundational skills down. They know, and they've watched how some of the students have, like, you know, slid because they didn't study, and then they've noticed it in themselves. And so they've made changes in the way that they are as a student. So all around, everybody is benefiting from it.
Great, that's awesome. So we had a question in the chat, and that actually leads perfectly into one of the questions that I wanted to ask you all to share. So the question was, I think this was for you, Lynn, was InSpark used in all the courses? Was it IRSC that used InSpark, or was that Houston?
We used it just in chemistry.
Just in chemistry?
Yes. In intermediate and college algebra, we used MyLab Math. In quantitative reasoning, we used Alex. And the English, I can't remember what, and I apologize because they were towards the end of this project. I can't remember what software that they ended up using. But chemistry did a full adoption of using InSpark. So that is what they use now. They don't use anything else.
Okay. And then Nathan, could you share what HCC used for their courses?
Sure. We the biggest platform that we were using was Newton, which is now with Wiley, but they have an Alta, their Alta platform. That's their adaptive platform. That was used in both math and economics. And then math has actually, they have a department-wide adoption now. They're using the Alex platform that supplements the McGraw-Hill textbook. And they've kind of moved that way. And we also have an instructor in economics that uses the Lumen Learning Waymaker platform. So we have 3 different platforms that have been used.
Okay, great. So I have some questions I can ask, but I would love to open it up. We have about, I think, like 10 minutes left or so. I want to see if anybody in here has any questions for our panelists from what they've been listening to. So Jory Lord asked in the chat, what role on campus conducts, so Lynn, what role on campus conducts your focus groups, and have you ever had students do that?
Myself and a faculty member are co-chairs. So when we were doing our QEP, we used focus groups, and we found it to be so successful that I approached our QEP leadership team that included 2 of our vice presidents and said, and I really think we should do a campus-wide work group where we do focus groups across our institution, no matter what area it is. So myself and a faculty member are the co-chairs, and then we had faculty and staff that are part of that work group. Everyone has gone through the research certification, so we're all certified. We work directly with our research, so we go through all the IRB process. Our work group fills out all of the paperwork and everything, so it's all documented. We make sure that there's consent forms and everything that are signed by everybody that is involved. We have not done student-led focus groups at this point. I know that some institutions do that, but we've chosen just to keep it in-house because our work groups, our faculty are required to be part of a work group. And so this is something that, you know, quite a few of them are involved. I think we are up to 16 members now. And we've conducted focus groups within the Every Learner Everywhere. We've done it. We've looked at our enrollment and student services area. We've done focus groups in some of our science courses. When we were going through COVID, we tried a different technique of using what we call sync online courses. And we did some focus groups with the students that were involved in that different kind of setup for an online course. I highly recommend any institution doing it because like I said earlier, the perspective that you obtain is tremendous, and it's in a confidential environment. I've been very surprised sometimes with the comments that have come out of these focus groups. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly, but that's why we're doing it, right? At the end of the day, we're here to make sure that our institutions are meeting the needs of our students and our faculty and our staff. So, I think I've answered all the questions.
That's great. Thank you. Any other questions in the chat or out loud? If anybody wants to unmute, brave the wildness of unmuting on Zoom. No? Okay. Well, I mean, so one question as I read your case studies that came to my mind was continuity. And that was a word that kept kind of come up in my mind of continuity between course instruction and academic supports, and like faculty and the tutoring centers or the academic support center. So how did you work? And you all kind of hinted at this or touched on it in your overviews. How did you work to develop that continuity between course instruction, course development, all those things, and the tutoring center or the academic supports that you used?
Well, I think Lynn kind of touched on it. We did something, similar where we had our full-time math tutor who was a liaison into the math departmental meetings. They were definitely updated on, everything that was going on in any particular time in the semester, and they would come back and share that with the other tutors. There was a lot of use of technology in terms of like SharePoint folders where we could drop, our faculty would drop specific, documents relating to assignments and things like that in there for the tutors to be able to view and see. We also worked with our library services team and created LibGuides so that, the tutors and the students and the faculty were all in coordination with information that was helpful, key subjects that students were struggling with in different courses, everything from, chemistry to college algebra to economics and things of that nature.
Anybody else want to add anything?
Yeah, one other thing one way that we've coordinated these things is through designing Canvas shells. So like, talked about the training, Lynn talked about the training. We also had a training program for faculty, and we also had a training program for the tutors. And those were designed by an instructional designer. And that instructional designer also worked with faculty to develop their courses. We had a kind of student onboarding module. All of this was kind of in an effort to just make students, faculty, and tutors aware of this new technology that we're using, the adaptive courseware, and the features that they could take advantage of when they're using it. I mean, ultimately, what we found was that it does come down to the student or the faculty member taking the initiative to sort of, get the data that is relevant to student performance, what they're struggling on, where they're falling, where they're having issues, and then communicating that to a tutor. So it ultimately does involve the people connecting and sharing that information. We don't have a good way of sort of institutionalize that operation or making that automated in any kind of way. So, but what we can do is we can train people on the effectiveness of this, why that's important, how they can find the data, how they can share the data, that kind of stuff. And that was kind of what we focused on.
Great. Lawrence, I think you were waving your hand earlier. Did you want to respond? If so, go ahead and unmute. Nathan or Amanda or Lynn, while he's speaking, if you want. Susan Mayer asked a question in the chat that I think you could probably give a quick answer to.
Yes, our tutors are embedded in the classroom, and that's thanks to COVID. That's also in our online sections. Now that we're coming back to being on campus, they're in the classroom. And then our academic support center has, not only are they embedded in the classroom, but those same tutors also do time in our academic support center, doing face-to-face one-on-one sessions, and online. So we've seen a huge uptick in the virtual tutoring, and especially with the our peer tutors, because they're students, so they really are able to relate. So we hired the most peer tutors that we've hired at our institution this fall. And I did want to mention real quick too, the students are recommended to us to become peer tutors from our faculty. And then we also send out just a regular announcement to our bachelor level biology students, encouraging them to apply to be a peer tutor.
Okay. All right. So Lynn, what platform are you using for your online tutoring?
They're using Blackboard Collaborate.
Oh, okay. And you've had a good experience with that overall?
So far, yeah, our global campus has helped, make those rooms and help with any of the bugs and anything that's happened. But so far, it's been very successful.
So we had a question in the chat. Connie Green is asking if she could contact you to make that connection for faculty in mid-sized and smaller colleges connecting with other faculty. She's asking if they can.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I can always, forward questions to the faculty who participated, and be happy to facilitate that.
Yeah, that would be great. As I coach, here I'll put a face with a voice. As I coach, I realize I usually have mid-sized and smaller colleges, and faculty members are interested, but because there's like one of them or two of them, they're the department. To go to the next step feels like, how do I have the time? Who's doing this? How would it work? And so oftentimes I find I can just get them to connect with another faculty member who has integrated it, worked with the tutor, worked with the software. It lets them feel like they're talking to not the coach, but to the real faculty member who's in the real classroom with the real students, and begin to see how they can put it together. So if there's a way to do that with these case studies, I think it just is a great resource, if you don't mind it, just to help one more person, 10 more people begin to say, oh, I could do that then, or I see how that works. So it means a lot.
For sure. We saw that too. I think once the faculty got talking together about different strategies, and a lot of discussion even with other colleges that were cohorts in the Every Learner Everywhere group, there's a lot of discussion about what platforms you're using, what strategies have you seen. We made use early on. We brought in someone who had implemented this at Colorado State University to talk to our faculty about what they were doing. So I agree with you 100%. That was something we found to be effective.
Yeah, the same thing here at Indian River, just getting like-minded faculty together and start working and looking at the various software and start discussing and developing. And we broke up, the faculty broke themselves up in curriculum teams, depending on the course. And they met monthly, and then at the full department meetings, they would share what's going on. And that was a great way to get more faculty involved with sharing the good things that they were noticing that was happening. So then you get that, the buy-in from even more faculty.
One of the things that I learned from sharing with my colleagues at Houston Community College, I actually learned it from the math department. So I implemented that within my course and actually shared with the economic department what we are doing now. So now I'm helping a lot of my colleagues design their courses and what they are doing differently. For instance, when I started using this adaptive courseware, I never used to have a prerequisite that the students need to complete before they can actually take any exam. So now the math department said, look, what we are doing is we do not allow our students to take any exam or even the quizzes without completing the assignment. The reason the Northeast College is successful, the math department is successful, because we have a prerequisite that all these students have to complete. Because you know, a lot of students will just show up today's exam and open the book and try to take the exam. So 2-3 years ago, I adapted that and it's working really well. So I shared that with my economics department, and now a lot of people are incorporating that in their classroom. So with Newton Otter, I actually made sure that when they help me with the design of my courses, that it is included in there where there is a prerequisite that the students have to complete before they can take the quizzes and also before they can take the exam. And whenever they do the quizzes and the modules, their performance on the exam is go way up.
Great. Thank you. So we are sadly out of time. I know it's a short session with a lot of information. Feel free to, these wonderful people shared that they're available to answer questions. You can find all of them at their institutions' websites and reach out to them. Again, you can reach out to us at ATD for support also, like for looking at these case studies. We're happy to help those out. There's a lot of case studies that we've been looking at with these exact things. Feel free to look at the ATD website on resources. And yes, it is break time.